When you look at the world around you, from a tiny ant to a giant blue whale, you just have to wonder. It's just so incredibly complex. It's this beautiful, tangled web of machinery and diversity. So today, we're going to try and unravel one of the biggest questions in all of biology.
I mean, really, think about it. Where does all this stuff come from? The wings of a butterfly, the human eye, the intricate dance of an ecosystem. How in the world does evolution, which is really just a process of trial and error, build things that are so mind-bogglingly elaborate?
And that question leads to a pretty serious challenge. Some people argue that certain biological systems are what they call irreducibly complex. You know, like a mousetrap. If you take away even one single part, the whole thing just stops working. So the thinking goes, how could it have possibly evolved step by step? It's a great question, but it turns out evolution has some pretty clever answers. Let's dive in and start at the very, very beginning, with the code of life itself.
So we're going to start at the smallest scale possible, the gene. And what you're about to see is that evolution is basically the ultimate recycler. It doesn't always need to invent something totally new from scratch. A lot of the time, it just finds a new job for an old part. The key idea here is something called gene recruitment. It's a simple concept, really. Let's say you've got a gene that does one job, maybe in your pancreas. Now, a random mutation could happen that doesn't change what the gene does, but it changes where it does it. And that one tiny little change, well, it can have absolutely massive consequences down the line.
And here's a killer example. Literally, snake venom. Snakes didn't just invent venom out of nowhere. They actually repurposed an existing gene, a defensin gene, whose original job was just to fight off infections. But a mutation caused this defensive gene to start being produced in the mouth. Then, over millions of years, more mutations fine-tuned that protein, turning it from a simple defensive tool into a weapon, a deadly, complex cocktail we now call venom.
Okay, so genes can get new jobs, got it. But what about building an entire body? You know, with legs and wings and eyes? Surely for something that complex, you need brand new blueprints every single time, right? Well, you'd think so, but the answer is a pretty surprising no. Life, it turns out, is a master of recycling its old blueprints too. So it turns out that most animals, we're talking everything from a tiny fruit fly to a huge elephant, are built using the same basic set of genes. Scientists call this the genetic toolkit. Think of it like a Lego set. You can use the same box of bricks to build a car, a house, or a spaceship. You're just using the same tools in different ways, in a different order, and for different amounts of time.
And this is where it gets really wild. Look at a fly and a mouse. They couldn't be more different, right? Well, on a genetic level, a fly's body plan is basically just an upside-down version of a mouse's. A fly's nerve cord runs along its belly, a mouse's runs along its back. But, and this is the amazing part, the exact same toolkit genes are responsible for that layout in both animals. They're just expressed in a mirror image pattern. It's the same blueprint, just flipped.
So here's the big takeaway. You don't need a huge revolutionary genetic change to get a huge physical change. Just tweaking when or where you turn on a single one of those toolkit genes during development, well, that's enough to kickstart the incredible evolutionary journey from a fish fin to a human hand. It's evolution working smarter, not harder. All right, so we've been talking a lot about survival, but that's only half of the evolutionary coin, isn't it? The other half is reproduction. And when you want to talk about what generates novelty, diversity, and just plain weirdness, there is nothing quite like the engine of sex. But this brings us to a huge paradox. Just think about it for a second. An asexual female basically just clones herself, passing on 100% of her genes to her daughter. But a sexual female, she only gets to pass on half of her genes, and she has to go through all the trouble of finding a mate. So from a pure numbers perspective, asexual reproduction should win out every single time. So why doesn't it? This disadvantage is so real, it even has a name, the twofold cost of sex. An asexual lineage can reproduce twice as fast as a sexual one. So with a cost that high, there must be some absolutely massive benefits to sex to make it all worthwhile. And there are. First off, sex is constantly shuffling the genetic deck. It creates new combinations of genes in every generation, which is a huge advantage when you're trying to adapt to things like fast-evolving diseases. That's the Red Queen effect. You have to keep running just to stay in one place. Second, sex is great for cleaning out the junk. In an asexual line, if a bad mutation pops up, it's stuck there forever, passed down to every descendant. Sex gives you a chance to have kids without that bad gene. But once sex is on the scene, Another layer of complexity gets added, and that's anisogamy. It's a fancy word, but it just means that the two sex cells, or gametes, are different sizes. Females make large, nutrient-packed, and really expensive eggs, and males make tons of tiny, mobile, and energetically cheap sperm. This one simple difference sets the stage for a whole new world of evolutionary conflict. And boy, can it lead to conflict. Check out what's happened in many duck species. The males and females have very different interests when it comes to reproduction. This has led to a literal evolutionary arms race. As males evolve more and more complex anatomy, the females have evolved equally complex corkscrew-shaped defenses to give them back control over who fathers their offspring. It's a physical battle of the sexes, written into their anatomy.
Okay, so we've gone from genes to bodies to behaviors. Let's scale it up one more time. All of these different pressures, the repurposed genes, the toolkit tweaks, the sexual conflict, they can all eventually lead to the ultimate evolutionary outcome, the birth of a brand new species.
At its core, speciation is all about building reproductive walls, or barriers, and it's a process, not a single event. It might start simply, with two populations evolving different mating songs. Over time, maybe their sperm and egg just aren't compatible anymore. And even if they can have an offspring, that hybrid might be sterile, like a mule, or just not survive very well.
Now here's where it gets really cool. Imagine two populations have been separated for a while and they've started to drift apart genetically. What happens if they meet up again? Well, if their hybrids don't do well, then natural selection will strongly favor any individuals who avoid interbreeding in the first place. That process, which strengthens the barriers to mating, is called reinforcement.
And these spadefoot toads are a perfect case study. Just look at this chart. It's showing the survival rates of their tadpoles. You can see the purebreds from either species, they do just fine, high survival. But the hybrids, their survival rate is way, way lower. And that low survival is the exact kind of pressure that would favor females who are really picky about whose mating call they respond to, so they don't waste their energy on an unsuccessful hybrid.
All right, for this last part, let's zoom the camera all the way out. I mean way out. We're going to look at the biggest patterns in the history of life, written across millions of years in the fossil record, a story shaped by the birth and the death of entire worlds.
So, there are two big forces that explain why species live where they do. The first is dispersal. That's the story of pioneers, right? A bird flies to a new island and starts a new population. The other is vicariance. That's the story of being split apart. A continent breaks in two, or a mountain range rises up, and suddenly one population becomes two, and they go on their own separate evolutionary journeys.
But the story of life isn't just a story of new things being created. It's also a story of things being destroyed. The history of our planet is punctuated by at least 5 of these absolutely catastrophic mass extinctions. These were events that totally reshaped life on Earth, wiping out the dominant species and, in a way, clearing the board for new ones to take their place. And if you want to understand the sheer scale of these events, you have to look at the end Permian extinction. People call it the Great Dying. Unbelievably huge volcanic eruptions in what's now Siberia pumped the atmosphere full of CO2, causing insane global warming. The result? Something like 96% of all species in the ocean gone. Life on Earth came terrifyingly close to being completely snuffed out.
And that brings us right back to today. We've seen how complexity is built piece by piece, through repurposed genes, shared toolkits, sexual conflict, and the slow birth of new species. But we've also seen how quickly it can all be torn down. The very same things that caused the Great Dying, a rapid spike in CO2, a warming planet, they're happening again. Only this time it's because of us. So the final question really isn't just about the past, it's about our future. Are we causing the 6th mass extinction? The answer, well, it's still being written.